9 guns found at a Vrbo inspires some to call for more regulations on vacation rentals in Freeport. WIFR's Nathaniel Langley learns what that could look like.
The weapons recovered over the weekend are the latest of crimes occurring inside Airbnbs and Vrbos. Although some have happened nearby in Rockford, Freeport's first instance doesn't surprise some.
All of us have to follow reasonable laws.
When Lynette Williams books a vacation rental, she says owners expect civility.
She does not come during the weekend to check to make sure that we've behaved like we should have behaved.
For years, the county board member has worried the rentals will lead to crime in Freeport neighborhoods. She claims 9 guns found at a local Vrbo confirmed that.
I don't understand how people can want to disrespect someone's personal property.
Freeport law requires rentals to register with the city.
The host of the Airbnb can certainly create any rules that entice safety in their residents.
But the city hasn't set a standard of safety hosts should follow.
They can certainly consult with the police department on any further safety regulations.
One study from the National Library of Medicine suggests Airbnbs lead to more violence in neighborhoods.
But that just has to make the rest of us law-abiding citizens more vigilant. I'm very concerned now about whether or not there's owners who do a background check.
The Vrbo incident is the first of its kind in Freeport. The county board member hopes new laws make it the last.
We want to make sure that everybody's rights are being protected.
Vrbo doesn't currently require guests to confirm their identity before booking. Airbnb hosts may offer a questionnaire. Background checks, though, are conducted more for hosts.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And Freeport police say this weekend's incident is under investigation. Future charges for the guns depend on forensic analysis by the Illinois State Police.